If someone died on the International Space Station today, what would happen to their body? There's no graveyard up there, no soil to dig, no chapel to say goodbye, just endless black, stretching out in every direction, no earth beneath your feet, no familiar sky above. Death in space isn't like anything we've dealt with before. It's not just about the science or the cold facts. It's about what it means to lose someone when you're millions of miles from home. Can you just eject a body into the void? What about contamination, respect, or even laws? As we prepare to send humans deeper into space, to the moon, Mars, maybe beyond, this question becomes urgent. How do you honor life when there's no land to bury on? What protocols exist right now, and what might the future hold for space funerals? The truth is stranger and more fascinating than you'd think. So buckle up. We're diving into the unspoken side of space travel, where death meets the final frontier. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll never look at the stars the same way again. So what happens if someone dies in space? Yeah, nobody wants to talk about it, but space agencies like NASA and the European Space Agency definitely have thought about it. A lot. The official term they use is crew member incapacitation, which is a very polite way of saying, well, dead. If that happens mid-mission, the first thing they do is quarantine the body, not out of disrespect, but to prevent any biological risks. Even though germs don't spread the same way in microgravity, you really don't want mysterious bacteria floating around your life support system. NASA has a protocol called body handling in space, and it includes something called the body bag, not your average zip-up bag. It's compact, folds up neatly, and seals tightly to lock in fluids, gases, and anything else you don't want floating around. It's basically a $15,000 high-tech vacuum-sealed burrito wrap for humans. Now, since bringing the body home isn't always possible, astronauts have considered storing it in cold zones of the spacecraft. For example, areas near the waste management systems or outer cargo bays. Not exactly the VIP section, but cold enough to keep the body preserved. And no, they don't just toss it out the airlock like in sci-fi movies. That would violate international space law. Yep, even space has lawyers. So in case of a death, the focus is on hygiene, safety, and respect. No funerals with bagpipes, just science, zippers, and very quiet sadness. Floating in zero gravity. Now you might be thinking, why not just open the hatch and give the body a little push into the great unknown? Sounds simple, right? Well, space law says absolutely not. Here's the deal. You can't just dump a body into space like it's a cosmic trash can. There's this very real, very official agreement called the Outer Space Treaty. Signed by over 110 countries, it basically says, don't leave stuff up there that can cause problems. And yes, a dead astronaut counts as stuff. A human body drifting through orbit becomes space debris. And believe it or not, space junk is a massive issue. Right now, there are over 35,000 tracked objects floating in Earth's orbit, moving at speeds up to 17,500 miles per hour. Even a paint chip can cause major damage. Now add a 180-pound astronaut spinning out of control. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. And let's say the body drifts toward another planet. Suddenly, you've violated planetary protection rules. We're talking about strict international guidelines designed to prevent contaminating other worlds with Earth's bacteria. Sending microbes to Mars? Yeah, that's a big no from every scientist ever. Plus, a body set adrift could technically orbit Earth or even the Sun forever. Not kidding. It becomes a permanent memorial that mission control has to track, probably next to old rocket parts and Elon Musk's Tesla. So no, there's no space Viking funeral. You can't just push the body out and cue the dramatic music. In space, even death comes with a lot of paperwork. Let's go back to 1967. Soviet cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov became the first human to die during a space mission. His Soyuz 1 capsule had over 200 known design flaws. Yeah, 200. Engineers knew it wasn't safe, but political pressure pushed the launch forward. Komarov knew the risks. When the parachute failed during re-entry, the capsule crashed at over 400 kilometers per hour. There was nothing left to save. His death forced the Soviet space program to slow down and rethink safety, something it badly needed. Then there's the Challenger disaster in 1986. Just 73 seconds after liftoff, a faulty O-ring caused the shuttle to explode. 7 astronauts, including teacher Krista McAuliffe, lost their lives. It was live on TV. The world was stunned. NASA shut everything down for nearly 3 years to overhaul its systems and safety culture. And in 2003, the Columbia shuttle disintegrated during re-entry. A piece of foam had damaged the wing at launch. Again, 7 astronauts died. Debris was scattered across Texas. Investigators found that warnings were ignored. The accident changed the way NASA evaluated in-flight damage. These tragedies taught us hard lessons, that space is brutal and small mistakes have deadly consequences. They also taught us the importance of preparation, including how we deal with death when it happens so far from Earth. We remember these astronauts not just for how they died, but for how they pushed human exploration forward, even when the cost was everything. Now that we've covered the harsh realities, let's get a little creative. When it comes to death in space, some sci-fi ideas might actually become real, and soon. Take burial on Mars or the Moon. Sounds like the perfect final resting place, right? But digging a grave isn't as easy as it sounds. The lunar surface is covered with a super fine, sharp dust called regolith, and Mars has hard, rocky soil. Plus, low gravity means traditional digging tools don't work the same way. Scientists think future colonists might use sealed burial pods, airtight containers designed to keep the body preserved and prevent contamination of alien soil. It's a mix of respect and science, protecting both the body and the planet. Then there's the idea of cremation in space. You can't just light a fire where there's no oxygen. So researchers have proposed laser cremation, using powerful laser beams to break down the body into ash without fire. Sounds futuristic, but lasers are already used in surgeries and industrial cutting. Imagine a high-tech Viking funeral, but with beams instead of flames. It could be a clean, efficient way to handle remains in space stations or on other planets. Some people dream bigger, like ejecting a body into the sun. It's dramatic and poetic, but technically tricky. The sun's gravity is strong, but our spacecraft and even Earth are moving sideways at about 67,000 miles per hour around the sun. To actually send something into the sun, you have to cancel out that sideways motion, which takes an insane amount of fuel. It's easier to send something out of the solar system than directly into the sun. So unless we invent some serious rocket power, a solar funeral might stay sci-fi. Now for something more down to Earth, or rather up to orbit. There are companies like Celestis and Elysium Space that already offer space funerals for ashes. For prices between $2,500 to $12,500, you can send a small amount of cremated remains into Earth's orbit, and sometimes even to the Moon. The ashes orbit quietly, a tiny human legacy circling the planet. So while space funerals might sound out there, they're already becoming reality. High-tech, respectful, and sometimes poetic ways to say goodbye, floating among the stars. We've talked about some wild ideas for space funerals, but what actually happens to a human body once it's out there, beyond Earth's cozy atmosphere? First off, space is a brutal place. No air, extreme cold, and intense radiation bombard everything. Without protection, a body won't just decay like it does here on Earth. There's no bacteria or insects in the vacuum of space to help break things down. Instead, bodies undergo something closer to freeze-drying or mummification. Imagine this. The moment a body is exposed to the vacuum of space, the fluids inside, blood, water, other juices, start to boil away. Thanks to the extremely low pressure, your saliva and tears would start evaporating rapidly. At the same time, temperatures can drop to around minus 250 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 157 degrees Celsius, freezing whatever's left. So the body kind of dries out and freezes, turning into a natural space mummy. Pretty grim, but also fascinating. Now add in the sun's radiation, which can actually cook exposed surfaces over time, breaking down cells and tissue. It's a slow process, but eventually the body becomes a brittle, dried-out husk drifting in silence. Here's an interesting twist. If the body is inside a spacesuit, it's a whole different story. Spacesuits are designed to protect astronauts from vacuum and temperature extremes, So inside, the body would stay intact longer, but eventually the suit will lose pressure or oxygen. Inside that sealed bubble, decomposition could start more like on Earth, assuming bacteria inside start breaking down tissues. But no bugs or scavengers will be there for a proper cleanup. One big question is whether bodies can decay in a vacuum. The answer is no, not really. Decay relies on microbes, insects, and moisture, all absent in space. So while the body won't rot, it won't stay fresh either. It'll just freeze and slowly degrade under radiation. So in space, death means something very different. No classic decay, no smell, no mess, just a cold, silent drift through the stars, preserved in a way that's both eerie and oddly poetic. So we've seen what physically happens to a body in space. But what about the big, deeper questions? Because when we talk about death, it's never just science. It's also culture, belief, and respect. One huge question is, would religions approve of how we handle death in space? Earthly religions have centuries of traditions tied to burial, cremation, and mourning. But what happens when you're light years away from a church, mosque, temple, or graveyard? Some faiths might adapt, finding new rituals for space, while others could struggle with the idea of a body floating or being stored in a spaceship's cold storage. The truth is, space forces us to rethink what sacred means. Then there's the question of what a respectful death looks like in a space colony. If humanity ever establishes settlements on the Moon or Mars, we'll need new ways to honor those who pass away. It might involve special memorial spaces, rituals adapted for low gravity, or even virtual ceremonies connecting loved ones back on Earth. Respect means more than just preserving the body. It's about dignity, memory, and community, even millions of miles from home. Can dignity be preserved in the cold, mechanical environment of deep space? That's not just a poetic question, it's practical. Without proper protocols, a death could become something clinical, distant, and lonely, the opposite of what most cultures value. So scientists, ethicists, and space agencies are already thinking ahead, planning for respectful ways to handle death that honor humanity's diverse beliefs and emotions. Space travel is pushing us into uncharted territory, not just in technology, but in our values. Death in space challenges us to invent new customs, ones that preserve dignity, honor tradition, and maybe create something beautiful and uniquely human, even when we're far from Earth. We've traveled from real protocols to wild sci-fi, from the science of a body in space to the deep ethical questions that follow. Death in space isn't just about what happens to our bodies. It's about the legacy we leave behind. Because out there, floating silently among the stars, death isn't the end. It's a legacy written into the orbit of the stars, a final chapter that becomes part of humanity's story in the cosmos. So now I want to hear from you. What would you want done with your body in space? Would you want your ashes launched into orbit, buried on the moon, or maybe a laser cremation, laser light show? If you enjoyed this journey beyond Earth, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next space adventure. There's so much more mystery and wonder waiting for us out there. And trust me, you'll want to be along for the ride. Thanks for watching, and remember, in space, the stars don't just shine for the living. They hold the stories of all who dared to reach for them